Our dear friends and brother and sister in Christ, Rich and Amy Reilly, are going to come today to talk to us about addiction. Rich and Amy Reilly started attending our church about a little less than a year ago. I think it'll be a year in February. And we got to know Rich and Amy through our neighbors. So backstory a little bit. When we were preparing to move here from Uganda in 2020, we bought our house online. So we used a realtor here in Newark. I had never been to Newark before. Nathan had preached here once. And we bought a house online. And we'd wanted to buy another house, but we got outbid. And so we found this house that had a lot of character, but it was a little bit small, but we decided we would rather have the character in that location than have a big house. And several people, since we've moved here, a lot of you cleaned our house, and you saw that it's a little bit small for a family of 6. And I want to say this, that I will take having a small house, having about 500 less square feet than what I would want in order to know the Reilly family. I would trade square footage any day of the week in order to know Mary Lou and her late husband, Rich's father, Bill, and I would trade square footage any day to know Rich and Amy Reilly and their family. And so it is with tremendous privilege that I introduce to you Rich and Amy Reilly, and you know my husband. He's going to come up and help. But can you give them a warm welcome as they're going to speak to us about addiction?
If somebody would have told me a year ago today I would be sitting in front of a church telling my story, I would have definitely disagreed. But, and also, it's a pretty tough follow. If Micah, you're watching, it was an incredible story last week. Inspired me. I thought about it a lot this last week, including in what I deal with. So kudos to you, but still can't root for the Pacers. So, addiction. I'm going to give you a little bit of back history into my life story. I grew up here in Newark, Ohio. I actually grew up on Poplar Avenue in the south end of Newark. I had a really good childhood. I was the youngest of 5, and I had really loving, caring parents that sent us to Catholic school. Because at least at that point in time and in their minds, they were sending us to Catholic school for a faith-based education. We didn't, so to speak, I mean, we didn't fit in with the group of people we went to school with. There was 2 ways to fit in when we went to Newark Catholic and St. Francis, and that was to either have means or be an athlete. And I'm grateful that I was an athletic kid and young man, and I kind of fit in that way, but we didn't have a lot. So a lot of my classmates went there because it was a private school. So growing up in the south end of Newark and ending up in a private school, there were a lot of insecurities there. I always had less than, kind of felt less than, and even in my own house. So you never know what people are going through, how they appear, or what their successes are, and how insecure those people can be. Mm-hmm. I deal with insecurity to this day. It was difficult because I had, just like following last week's story, I had a tough follow with my siblings. I have a sister that's a nurse practitioner that was very, very, very smart in school. And when I got into school, one of the nuns used to ask me why I couldn't be more like my sister. My brothers were really good athletes. My middle brother was an exceptional athlete, although I still think I'm the best athlete in the family. But it was a tough follow, too, because he was a very good athlete. So I always felt like I was chasing something to get attention from my parents, to get attention from my peers. So I grew up I don't think I ever felt whole. And I think I grew up every day and I didn't really even like the person I saw in the mirror because the expectations I had set for myself were so high that I felt that was everyone else's expectations for me. And then I came to probably in my early teens, maybe 14 or 15 years old. For the first time, I found alcohol. And it was home. For the first time, I had something to be able to take away the pain, take away the insecurity. I didn't feel less than when I had alcohol in my system. A lot of people don't really understand that with addiction, because even though you have a choice to get in it, as you'll hear in the story, you don't always have a choice to stay in it. And so I continued, I remember the first time I got drunk, I was probably 14 or 15 years old. And, I continued through high school to drink alcohol, occasional recreational drugs, things like that. I went to college, and it was freedom. I'm not like the freedom Sean was singing about, but, freedom in the sense that I had nobody looking over my shoulder, and I realized I could drink and use drugs every day and feel whole, and nobody was there to tell me no. Then when I was 21 years old, I remember the day vividly. It was the day before Thanksgiving. All my friends and I had come back from college, and we all would go out to the bars and party, and we all got to see each other. And I specifically didn't drive. A friend of mine, he drove for us. And I'm going to fast forward to the end of the story, and then I'll go back to the rest of the story. I remember getting picked up at 5 o'clock, and I remember waking up 3 days later strapped down to a bed in Grant's Trauma Center. What happened in between was we went out, drank a lot. I don't know how I found out that there was an after party at a friend of ours' house, which my brother was present at as well. And I ended up getting the keys to his car some way, somehow, about 4 a.m, and I drove his car into a tree. I think the paper boy is the one that found me, and I was taken to Licking Memorial, where I had destroyed my hip. When they brought me there, from what I understand, I had a dislocated hip, and I had broke the iliac crest of my pelvis. For a guy my size, that's about that big around. And they tried to set my hip, and they nicked an artery. So when they life flighted me, I coded in the life flight a couple times on the way to Grant. So I was put in a medical induced coma. So because they didn't want me to move, because they didn't want me to do any more damage. So when I woke up, here's all my family there and some of my closest friends, and I really had no idea what had happened. Come to find out, when I'd hit the tree, they found me outside the vehicle. They don't know if I was thrown from the vehicle or if I got my way out. I would probably say I got my way out. But it was, yes, it was a long process. So I had to wait 4 or 5 days to have the surgery. I spent 17 days in the trauma unit. Needless to say, there was a lot of damage. They didn't know if I had severed sciatic nerve endings or just bruised them. Now I can say by the grace of God, I only bruised them. So I found out I could walk again, but it was a very painful process. And, they had me on a lot of medications and stuff for the recovery. But I had done so much damage to my hip that at 23 years old, I was diagnosed with avascular necrosis, which is essentially the death to the bone. The vascular system inside my femur was dying. So actually, when I saw my last x-ray before I got into sobriety and quit going to doctors, the bone looked almost like it was gone. It didn't show up, so to speak, like the rest of my bones did in my x-ray. Avascular necrosis gave me two options, and one of them, the doctor said, we can either replace your hip, which they didn't really want to do in 1999 because the technology wasn't very good and I was a pretty young guy, or they could medicate it. So, I mean, I had kind of been around the recreational drug screen. I was seen. I wasn't opposed to medicating it, so I like to say my best drug dealer was my doctor. So I proceeded to start taking opiates, hundreds of opiates. And at first I did take them to medicate the injuries, but eventually I started taking them because my body became physically addicted. And when I say you have a choice to get in but not to get out, I remember the physical addiction that came with opiates was, whereas a couple pills a day would ease my pain for the first couple weeks, it took 30 to 40 of them a day to ease the mental and physical pain I had at the end of my addiction. Taking lethal doses of Tylenol. So it didn't take very long for me to get physically addicted. And I didn't understand what that was. I thought I was a dirtbag because a lot of people told me I was a dirtbag. And there was a stigma against people that were drug addicts. And again, I shaved in the dark for the better part of 5 years. Well, I would light a candle, so at least I wouldn't cut my face. But the purpose for that is because I couldn't stand to see who I was. So I got towards, and then, in all this, I met her, thank God. And when I started to get really into what we would call late stage addiction, where, like I said, I was taking 7 to 10 pills just to get out of bed in the morning. We're talking like 5,000 milligrams of acetaminophen, Tylenol, at a time, which is lethal to your body. It became apparent to me that, well, there was really no way out. And I remember towards the end, there's a lot of funny stories that I could get into, but I probably really shouldn't, especially in church. You can certainly sidebar me and ask me, but I got into the physical addiction so bad that I became too scared to live but afraid to die. I was letting everyone around me down. And the insecurity got worse. And as the insecurity got worse, the appetite for more became greater. So Amy and my father they tried to push me to get sober because they saw the pain, but I knew that I was no good for any of them. And if there's anybody in here that feels that way right now, there's hope as I talk about this. But I knew that at that time I knew, as a matter of fact, there was no way out. Every time I tried to stop taking the opiates or stop drinking, the withdrawal symptoms were so great, it was either death or do more. And I tried to convince everyone in my life to turn their back on me. I tried to convince everybody in their life that I was a dirtbag, that I was never going to be any better. The insecurity only got worse. And but my dad and my wife just wouldn't. So it brings me to it was just a little short of 16 years ago, I tried to take my life because I felt that was the only way Amy would ever be free of me. And I won't really get into specifics. I drank pure grain alcohol, and a lot of it, even for a guy my size. And I remember waking up disappointed. And I had to drag myself in a seedy motel to a shower and wipe all the bodily fluids I excreted off myself. And I remember having alcohol poisoning so bad that when I moved my head, my eyes didn't water. They felt like they were falling out. So I decided that I would go home. I mean, when I say I had a plan, I'd given my car away. I had, man, I can tell you at the time, even when I woke up the next day, it was the least amount of anxiety I had felt in years, knowing that I didn't have to wake up in anxiety the next day. So when I woke up and I really was just sick, and I went home, I had, her and I were fighting because I literally gave away everything I owned because I thought I was doing people a favor and her. So when I went home, we were fighting, so I went out, and I remember the night sleeping on a hammock outside in like 30-degree weather. I woke up the next morning. We were still fighting. I still didn't want to live at that point, so I threw on some shorts and a T-shirt and some flip-flops and started walking, knowing that I had miles before I'd have to make another decision if I wanted to do anything to myself again. And if you think mentally, financially, spiritually bankrupt, all that, walking down the road, not wanting to really even be there. And I remember Amy pulling up beside me and me just asking her to please leave me alone. I wanted her to hate me. And then I remember a cop pulling up, because they knew that I wasn't of sound mind. Cop pulling up asking me, and I, just asked him, am I under arrest? And he said no, and then with something I can't repeat in church, I asked him to leave. And then I remember I didn't have pockets in my shorts or anything like that, and I really wanted a cigarette, what Jade talked about, because at the time I smoked.
Amy, didn't you call the sheriff that met Rich? Can you tell us about that before Rich gets to the golden cigarette pack story?
When I called, can you guys hear me? Yeah. When I called, the dispatcher was so kind. I explained a little bit of the story in a really quick amount of time because I finally took him serious, which I had not in the past. I didn't recognize the symptoms and the signs, and I was so mad I didn't even think about that. But anyway, when I called, she said, "Hang on, honey, I'm trying for you. I got the perfect guy. He's an intervention specialist. I'm gonna send him. I just have to get a hold of him." So he kept telling me to leave, and I kept turning around and coming back past him just to try to prevent him from doing anything. And then once I saw the sheriff come, I left.
Well, it had started to rain. I think it's an important part of the story. Here I am walking. I'm freezing, I remember. All I wanted was a cigarette. And I'm walking down the road, and I didn't even have pockets. I couldn't even afford a pack of cigarettes at that point in time anyway. And I'm walking down the road, and I come up, and there's literally a pack of cigarettes laying on the side of the road. And not only was there a pack of cigarettes, one, they weren't the brand I liked, but they were dry. I mean, it was raining pretty hard, and these cigarettes were dry, and I picked them up, and I was like, whoa, like I don't have anything to light them with, so I just kept walking. And then
You were so mad.
I was.
Oh, got my cigarettes, but no lighter.
Yeah, no lighter, not the brand I liked. By the way, I'm still convinced the intervention specialist threw him on the side of the road. But I'll explain to you the way I look at it differently. So I'm walking down the road, and he pulls up again. I'm like, dude, leave me alone. And he said, oh, you got some cigarettes there. I was like, yeah, but I don't have anything to light them. He goes, oh, hey, I got something for you. I got this at a traffic stop. And he gives me this lighter that was as big as my cell phone. It was like one of those things you buy on the counter. It was the most hideous thing in the world, but it lit a cigarette. And I started smoking a cigarette, and then when push come to shove, the guy talked me into getting into his car and going and talking. And yeah, he helped save my life. The whole process did. Now, I've given my AA lead hundreds of times in front of hundreds of people. And I've always told them, because I got sober as an agnostic, that it was the intervention specialist that did this. It wasn't God. Well, now, I still believe the intervention specialist put those cigarettes on the side of the road. But I do believe he was doing the work of God.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Amen.
So I'm going to make this part quick. I did get, that was the last day. That was my sobriety date. I mean, I'm close to.
That day that with the intervention specialist was your sobriety?
Yeah, that's my sobriety date. It's 12th of March. About 15, almost 15 years sobriety, but it's been north of 17 years since I've taken an opiate.
I love that, Rich, because we say, Nathan and I love to say, whenever we can, that those of us who follow Jesus, that we are missionaries. And we are missionaries cleverly disguised as teachers, as nurses, as police officers. I love that Amy said, the perfect guy came. I love that. I love that so much.
Would you have talked to a pastor if the pastor pulled up on the side of the road?
No way. I would have been more offended.
All right. Okay.
But the cool thing is I got, I spent a lot of years in sobriety thinking that, I did it all myself. But, when I lost my nephew this past year and I got a chance to meet Nathan, and I realized that I came here to try to find a better place in my mind for my nephew, and I found a better place for myself. It's been an amazing year, as hard as it's been. But the message, before we get to them getting to ask some questions, I guess the message is there is hope, but you've got to want to do it for you. And if somebody struggles with addiction, any kind of addiction, I guess hope's found here. So,
Amen. We're going to ask some questions, but first, can we thank him for sharing that vulnerable story? Okay, so you told us a story that you probably could go another 2 hours, 3 hours. You could go into the details on all kinds of things. We could start all the way over. Amy could tell the whole thing from her perspective. What it comes down to today, and kind of the subject is, we as a church want to be the very best neighbors we can be to people who are struggling with addiction in the process of recovery. The numbers, which we've talked about a little bit, are somebody realizes they have an addiction or comes to grips with their addiction, and they enter some sort of process of recovery, but success, as we would determine success in recovery, because you always say, I'm a recovering whatever, just to not ever let yourself out of that process, really, just to make sure you never go back. But this actual success of that, you told us was 10%?
yeah, to get to 1 to 5 years of sobriety, it's a little bit higher. It's like 20%. But to get past 5 years of sobriety, it's right around 10%.
So in any given, if you have 10 people who all say, I have this addiction and I want to begin recovery, 9 out of 10 of them will not succeed.
Yeah, it's easy.
Statistically.
Yep.
Why?
Because they have to want to do it for them. I have 3 1-year sobriety coins. When I say 18 years of not taking, close to 18 years of not taking an opiate, that's because I got 365 days sober for someone else, and I celebrated on day 366. And then on day like probably 370, my 2nd year of sobriety, I used a fight with my wife to say I'll show her, and went and got drunk. And then the last time I did it, after telling all that story, I finally got sober because I wanted to have a better relationship to myself. But yes, certainly, it's easy. Like, I think the average Major League Baseball player, a quarter of the time can hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball for a base hit, but only 10% of people who get into recovery stay there. So it's amazing.
Oh my goodness. For the one, so you have these 10, 9 of them try, after 9 of them kind of fall off one by one until they get to that 5 year. The one makes it. For the one that made it, what does that cost to make it? What is that to make it? What have they spent? What have they given up? What part of that, if we want to be a part of that, to help that one, or help the one become 2, help the 2 become 3, what does that cost that person to make it out?
It doesn't cost their identity, but it's going to cost everything around them early on. One of the things that I had to do personally in my own experience is I had to get rid of the friends that kept me drunk and high. I had to quit going to the places that made me feel I wanted to get drunk and high. And I had to change my habits and change my hobbies early on, at least, that I tied into not being sober and in recovery. So it wasn't always that way, but early on, I had to do it. And I needed a lot of support in that too.
Amy, we have 3 more questions for them. Amy, if someone were to walk into your house on a bad day, in those beginning years of Rich's addiction, what would they have seen?
Probably not a whole lot. A lot of times he wasn't around. I was quiet. I hid. I didn't share my story with anyone. Early on, he explained a little bit about after he relapsed, he started going to AA, and anonymity is huge. So I thought I was protecting him and myself. A lot went on. I had 2 very close friends that I confided in. I worked at the local hospital, and one was a doctor and one was a best friend. And I did tell them a lot, but not everything. And they did not judge me. They were very good to me. Even though I thought that I was educated, I was not. I probably wasn't the best person for him. I can remember having all the compassion in the world for addicts and alcoholics that would come in to ER. The Shepherd Hill people, my heart broke for them.
Shepherd's Hill isn't a...
Shepherd Hill is a local rehab facility.
Okay.
They have an outpatient and an inpatient. And they would bring, every day they would bring people, patients over to eat meals. And we would, I always felt really bad for them. A lot of times they were kind of disheveled. You could tell they weren't thinking clearly. They would get their drinks and they would be shaking. And one day I was sitting with my group of friends. We were eating in the cafeteria, and I saw the Hill gang come in, and there was my husband. And I had always been, I wasn't the best for him like he describes it. I wasn't at all. It was very hard for me. I don't know how the poor guy got sober, honestly, with me, because I tore him down a lot because of my hurt and my pain, and I took it so personally. But when I looked down there and I saw my husband, I just was like overwhelmed with emotion, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's sick. He's sick. I never thought of him in that light. I just was so caught up in everything else. I didn't see him as I saw them until I saw him with them that day. And that day changed me forever. I'll never forget that minute. I just won't. So I hit a lot. No one, my family really didn't know. Nobody really knew. So they probably, on any given day, walking into my house, probably wouldn't have seen much.
So you kind of fluctuated between like hiddenness and anger is what I'm hearing you say, like your relationship with Rich.
Yes.
So if I were to show up unannounced, I might see you so angry at your husband, because for a long time what you're saying is you didn't understand that he was sick. He had a sickness. So I could knock on your door and see anger between you two, or if I showed up on another day, I might just see you kind of pretending and hiding like everything's fine. Is that right?
Yes, I pretended and hid almost every day. Even my coworkers probably judged me and couldn't understand why I would sneak off and make phone calls or come into work late, because they have no idea what happened the night before. So it was pretty hard. It was difficult, but I wasn't going to leave him. But again, as he explained, I wasn't the best person for him either.
Amy, how can we be the best neighbor to you? Or how could, if we know someone, or if our neighbor is struggling with this, what are ways that we could be helpful to you? As a caretaker, as a spouse or a caretaker of someone who's struggling with addiction.
Yeah, that part, it comes at different times. It might vary, but my best advice would be Al-Anon, because I refused it for a while. I thought I had this, I know what I'm doing. I had no idea. Education is key, because you have to understand in order to try to help them. What I was told, one of the first things I was told in Al-Anon was exactly what I didn't want to hear, is you have to let him help himself and be selfish. And I thought, be selfish? That's what I've dealt with for years. So it was really the last thing I wanted to hear, but what I really needed to hear was me take care of me and him take care of him. And Al-Anon will give you a book, and in reading through the book, I just kept relating to myself.
Al-Anon is the group for the spouses of those in AA, correct?
Or family members, friends, anyone actually,
Yes. Yeah.
Because we don't know how to help them. You don't just have that in you unless you've been through it before. And you also, something that's really important is, and he talks about being suicidal. I was oblivious. I thought he was just crying out for attention.
Yeah.
So the fact that he had a plan, had a previous attempt, gave away his car, which I didn't even know about until he tells people later. I wouldn't have recognized those signs. So there are some things that you really do have to watch for and be cautious about. I wasn't doing him any favors, tearing him down every day, which is what I did.
So part of what I'm hearing is you were stuck in a cycle that you didn't want to be in and weren't sure how to get out, and it was self-defeating. And maybe there would be an assumption from us if we came and knocked on your door or looked, if we wanted to be a good neighbor to you, that you know everything that's going on and you are intentionally deciding not to help it, and maybe you're even facilitating. We have no idea what your involvement is in it, but what we're hearing from you, and maybe help me to know how common this is, in a way, you were both stuck in a cycle that you didn't want to be in and you didn't know how to get out, but you wanted a life that was different, both of you, and you wanted it so bad you were willing to try and make the life look like it was what you wanted it to be, even if you had to. Is this common? Is this, Rich, you're shaking your head, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to put your dirty laundry out there. It's hard to, and I say it from the person that was actively using, but I have since had a business partner, family members that have dealt with addiction, so I've kind of been on both sides of it now. And it's hard to put it out there. It's hard to let everybody in and let them see what's going on, because the stigma against somebody that is an addict or somebody that has any kind of addiction or any kind of hurt or anything, there's a super big stigma against that. And it's hard to, I've grown to know that what other people think of me is none of my business, but it took a long time to get there.
Amy, I know that Nathan has one last question for Rich, but I would love to know what you would like to say to those who are watching or those who are in the congregation of a spouse or a family member of someone who is struggling with addiction. Addiction isn't just drugs and alcohol. It's anger, rage, it's pornography, it's, I know Rich will probably give us a whole list. What would you say to the spouse or the mother or the grandmother of someone, now that you're a Christian, what would you have to say to them? Well, you've always been a Christian,
And
but
I
now
have.
that you, yes.
And I have,
yes.
and I did a lot of praying
Yes.
along the way, trying to get him to come to church and come with me. And I didn't go to church. I never stopped praying. Don't be me. Don't hide. Reach out. One of my biggest struggles was telling my family. My dad, that was a really hard one because you never want to disappoint your parents. And I remember when we checked him in, I think it was probably a couple days after his sobriety date. It was before that, he started going to Shepherd Hill, and I actually finally felt comfortable in telling my dad, and it was really hard. And I told my dad, and he said, "I love you, and I just want you to be happy." And he said, "Tell Rich I'm proud of him." So it's a pretty good example of, what was I hiding from? What was there were so many good people in my life I could have turned to, and they would have been there because they were there for me when they found out. People were so amazing, and there's just no reason to struggle or hide or feel shame.
I have a question, Rich, about Celebrate Recovery, leadership, startup date, but I want to just say something first to you. When Jade and I were just starting our fundraising for missionary work, we came up with this idea that we were going to pique everybody's interest by telling them why we shouldn't be missionaries. And it worked. It was a good pitch.
We were fully funded.
Yes, very quickly. But we said, here's all the mistakes we've made, and here's everything we've been through, and here's our story and what God has done to redeem us. And so we would open by saying, we want to tell you this morning why we shouldn't be missionaries. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember the guy, Pastor Bob, who came and preached here, an older man. And he came up to us after we had done that one time, and he said, "How many times have you guys done that?" We said, "A lot." And he said, "That's going to be heavy to keep telling all that." He said, "Nathan, you and Jade are not those people anymore." And I want to thank you this morning for telling us a story that's a part of your history. And I want to thank you on behalf of everybody else. But I want to tell you, as your friend and as your pastor, you're not that man. I've watched you. I'm impressed by you, and I'm proud of you. And whatever the stuff that comes from all of that, we have an enemy who cannot wait to convince you to just carry around a little bit of the continuing guilt and shame that you have something that you owe and you don't. You are not that man. And we're proud to follow your leadership. So it's not really appropriate for me to hear all that story, and you didn't get into much of your redemption just because we can only talk about so much in one service. But I'm getting ready to ask you about your leadership in CR, and I want to make sure you know that this is not just me ignorant on the sidelines saying, "Well, congratulations on your on your sobriety, and will you please help us get this CR started? That's not what it is. If I didn't stand in concert with the people who are closest to you, saying that we see that you are a leader and that you have everything in you, that God has gifted you to lead a culture that will transform our community. Here's my question.
Nathan, can I say something really
Yes.
quick? I do want to say to you, Amy, because you're getting all mushy and I wanted to get in on it, that that it takes a lot of bravery to sit in front of a couple hundred people watching and sitting in our service today and say, I wasn't kind to my husband. I didn't know that he was sick. To say that you were mean sometimes and you were angry and your words were not kind and that you didn't have an empathy for the person in your room because you were so wounded by the addiction. Something that I love about you and why I encouraged you to be a Stephen minister is because you are a wonderful, empathetic listener. And I love that for 15 years you prayed for your husband, you didn't lose your faith in God, and that the Lord has redeemed your marriage in such a way that Rich is leading CR and you're a Stephen minister. And I know today if there are wives or mothers or grandmothers of someone who is struggling with addiction, that they have a friend in Amy Reilly. And so I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Anyone ever needs to reach out, please do. Please don't hesitate.
So we have seen the shocking, disturbing, horrible numbers of addiction, overdose in our county, in our state, in our neighboring county, Franklin County. But Licking County is not much better than Franklin County. So we know as a church that we have immediate work right now, and we have work cut out for years to come of the damage that's already been there, but the pandemic has not helped addiction. And the numbers that I'm referring to, the term overdose means that there's something physical that's been taken. So that doesn't even include all of the other habits and hang-ups, different things that we can become addicted to. You're getting ready to start at potentially the hottest moment in your entire life, a Celebrate Recovery at our church. Can you dream? What does our church look like and do over the next 5 years? How can we help?
When we were at that leadership conference last year, one of the things I heard was that the test is now, the lesson's been the last couple years. And I firmly believe that. I've taken that into my entrepreneurship and my business, and I'm trying to take it into leading Celebrate Recovery. And a couple things I envision. One, everybody in here has to realize that there is a fair amount of addiction to drugs and alcohol in Celebrate Recovery, but it's about everything. And when she talked about Al-Anon earlier, in the world of AA, there's Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon, which is for the family. In CR, it's all one. So couples that are having issues where there's somebody in addiction and somebody dealing with it can recover together, whether it's codependency or PTSD, anxiety, depression, anger, drugs, alcohol, sexual sin, pornography, all of it. There's a list of it. If I went on, we probably wouldn't have lunch, and I'm hungry.
That's a weird thing for everybody to laugh at, isn't it?
But it's true. So, but if I were to dream, and I've never been part of Celebrate Recovery before now, and I wasn't part of Community Wesleyan Church when they had Celebrate Recovery before. But what I would, if I say dream, what I'm going to work my hardest to do is realize that this is one church. And when there's people that come in to Celebrate Recovery, they're coming to Community Wesleyan Church, not Celebrate Recovery only. And that when you see people, new faces that are in the church that are part of Celebrate Recovery, don't look at them as those people. And please invite them into the church, and because I'm going to invite anyone that's already part of the church to come down a path and a journey of recovery with me. because I didn't have God when I got sober, but I do now. It's easier, but it's still hard. But please, again, I've heard a lot of people talk about people in recovery, and there's stupid and ignorant, and it's never really stupidity because people just don't know. And I'm going to help people know, but please, it's one church, it's one ministry, it's everyone together. So that's it.
Yeah, we can get on board with that, can't we? Yes, amen. In closing, we've discussed, and we kind of, even as we were talking about this interview, we just asked, what do you guys want to do? And we talked about having a time of response. I'm a preacher, and my mouth is just full of words and ideas, and if I don't make myself stop them, they just start coming out. Honestly, guys, what we talked about and what you said when we sat down, I'm just going to put my microphone down, and I'm going to let Sean play, and I'm going to ask that you share and explain. And what I'm going to ask here is, don't wait another day. There's no reason. Shame has no right. Shame has no right. Guilt has no right. The potential of tomorrow hangs on the decision of today. And so whatever they're getting ready to say, whatever opportunities, I want to let you know that it doesn't matter if you are brand new to the church and you've never been here. It doesn't matter if you have gone here for 35 years and everybody thought they knew you. It doesn't matter if you're a board member. It doesn't matter if you are me. We all need Jesus, and we all got to make big choices. And this is a place where you can make them in front of everybody. And you will be loved. You will be encouraged. The thing that you gain from doing it in front of everybody today is the absolute assurance that whatever road is in front of you, you don't have to travel that by yourself. We got a ton of people here who love to travel together. If you have somebody traveling with you right now on a really hard road, can you say amen? Amen.
Rich and Amy, we're going to let you take it over.
I heard a quote last week, and I thought it was really appropriate. It said, "Your past doesn't define you, but the way you heal does." So, in closing, Rich is going to be on this side. I'm going to be on this side. We would like at this time for people to come up. If you want us to pray with you, you can come now.